and you probably understand where this question is coming from, but you have religious people who honestly think their views, their religious views of biology, should be taught as science in schools. Now, I really don't know how one gets around that. I mean, you just can't say. I mean, if you honestly think that your children are being taught factually wrong material when they're taught about evolution, what do?
You set up your own school system. That's what the Catholic Church did at one time. You know,
right.
In the early days, they felt that the Protestants were in charge of the schools, so we set up our own schools because we so valued what we believed. And I'm not saying that that's a solution to this issue, but I think it does ask an interesting question. That if you really have such a difference of opinion with regard to the system, that you may well have to be homeschool or do some other way of school.
So my point, though, is that intelligent design and creationism insist this is not a religious attitude. I mean, that's the whole theory behind scientific creationism. This is as much science as any other kind of science. And therefore, by keeping this true approach to biology out of the classroom, that is discrimination of some form. I mean, in the response to this, I'm just curious about that. Dr. Islambouli?
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that sometimes even Muslims don't know it. And this is what we call it Islam for Muslims living as a minority in a non-Islamic country. Which means there are what you call something that is universal truth that we believe in. But there's a difference between how you practice your faith in a predominantly Islamic community where everybody is Muslims, and how you practice your faith in a country or in a nation where you are a minority, especially if you are part of many minorities. And then here it's interesting where Islam will allow you to give you the flexibility to work within a system where you cannot impose your values on them, and on the other hand, you don't feel offended by their practices. And this is something that I think very important to understand, that where are we living and among who we are living and how we can work together. At some point, I thought about establishing your own community, you establishing your own schools, you establish your own ghetto, for example. But I don't think it works. Because, eventually your children are going to be impacted by the outside world. So it's instead of staying inside your cocoon and curse the outside world, you have to be part of it and work together in trying to bring it closer to your values rather than separating yourself. That's why I believe, for example, Islamic schooling doesn't work. Because my children have to go to public school, engage with other students of different faith, and when they are exposed to ideas that I believe they are not part of our faith, then I can engage in dialogue with my children. And this, I think, it's easier than having someone who living in America while at the same time having their own values, trying to be separated from the others. Like you are trying to be like the Amish. And I don't think the Amish is a successful experience. This is for a different debate, but we cannot live all of us like this, separate ourselves and claim that we can keep our values.
Reverend Richter, the people, though, who are most anxious to unseparate church and state come from not your tradition, to be sure, the Protestant tradition in general, the very evangelical side. Mm-hmm. Any comments?
My previous life was in music education, and when I became a pastor, I worked in a community that was predominantly very conservative evangelical Christians. I was asked to conduct a musical involving all the children from that community, from those churches. And there was a line in the musical. It was a Christmas musical. And there was a line, the musical was the stars in the heavens experiencing the nativity. And one of the stars said, one of the lines was, "I've been hanging around these heavens for millions of years and have never experienced anything like this." And I had parents just in an uproar. because the Bible says creation occurred 5,000 years ago. And I said, well, first off, you need to show me where that is, because I missed that in seminary. But secondly, my question to them was, is it too unbelievable that God's vastness is just, you just can't put a timeline to it? Is it too unbelievable that the vastness of God's creation can't embrace all of that? And they had no answer for me, so they pulled their kids out of the musical. But I think that's my answer. Is it too unthinkable to think of God's vastness as so great?
Okay, thank you. Well, it's almost 1:30, so I thank our panelists for sharing their thoughts with us today. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Ayush Kadia, and I'm a senior at University School. Today, at this City Club of Cleveland Youth Forum, we've been listening to a panel discuss religion and politics. Before you go, we would like to ask you to fill out the surveys on your table and return them at the door. Thank you to our distinguished panel, thank you to our moderator, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.